Hare Krishna. Good morning, Bhakta Kim. Here in person, we had Mother Ladini and Mother Damayanti. Today, we'll be reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is. Don't remember what chapter. Let me flip open and skip there. We are reading from chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Again, is Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 9, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Text 1 is where we're reading from. The most confidential knowledge. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan
Idham tu te gunyatamam.
Idham tu te guvyatamam.
Pravakasya mai anasuva.
Pravakshami anasuyave.
Ganam vijana satam.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Yaj jantav moksas sabat.
Yagyatva mokshase shubha.
Would anybody like to chant the verse? Would you like to chant the verse?
Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idham tu te guvyatamam.
Edam tu ye guvatatam.
Pravakshami anasuyave.
Prabhaksham side anusuvre.
Jnanam vijnanam sahita.
Gyanam vijnanam satitam.
Yagyatva mokshase shubha.
Yagyag moksha sapteta. Would you like to recite the verse, Bhakti and Kim?
No, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go through the word for word now. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Bhagavan Uvacha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
Adham,
Ida,
this,
this,
tu, but,
but,
te, unto,
unto you,
oh, unto you.
unto you.
Gudyatam,
Guryatamam,
most confidential.
most confidential.
Pravakasmi,
Pravakshyami,
I am speaking.
I am speaking.
Ansuvaya,
Anasuyave,
to the non-envious.
to the non-envious.
Ganam,
Jnanam,
knowledge.
knowledge.
Vijana,
Vijnana,
realize knowledge.
knowledge.
Satam,
Saitam,
with.
with.
Yat, which.
Which.
Jantava,
Yatva,
knowing.
knowing.
Muksha,
Moksha said,
be released.
be released.
Asubhat.
Ashubha.
From this miserable material existence.
From this miserable material existence.
Translation. The Supreme Lord said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most secret wisdom, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. I want to read that again, just for my own self.
I just did it.
The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of the devotee. Discussing of Krishna is very potent. And if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this ninth chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the second and third chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. The topics discussed in the seventh and eighth chapters are specifically related to devotional service. And because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the ninth chapter deal with unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rata Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now, the first verse has specific significance. Knowledge, adham gyanam, refers to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. But the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. At the time when one's heart is cleared of the material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and spiritual activities by which one understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, he has already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality, Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now, in the chapters 9th and 10, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word ansoyava in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most uh, eroded, I don't know that word, erot scholars. What's that word?
You ask me.
Is it Arabic or
Ed-
Egyptian?
Educated, like educated.
Oh, maybe that's what it's. Yeah, educated scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately because they are envious of Krishna. Their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Vishnupadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharni Niveshesha Srinivadi Pastyati Desha Tarni. Hare Krishna. Oh, there's a lot there to kind of be with. Um, I um I picked this particular verse to just really highlight this experience of knowledge and this I guess this um there's all sorts of knowledge in this world, material knowledge, um and this Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Arjuna. And Krishna is imparting Arjuna with this knowledge, because Arjuna is his dear friend. And um, so, yeah, for me, I guess what was kind of immediately kind of coming up for me. Well, I first of all, I woke up with a dream this morning. There was a coworker of mine. He was actually my supervisor, and I was riding around in his truck, and he's kind of in his elderly age. I guess in the dream, and even in real life, he's probably in his early 70s right now. And he was really like in the question of like, you know, what he did with his life. Like he was in the question of like feeling satisfied with his work career and his life in general. He was just kind of in the question of that. And I was kind of just being with him in that process and really hearing him, um and just really helping him gain clarity through this process of empathic dialogue and really just, entering his world and, connecting to his emotions. And it was helping him like, go deeper and inquire deeper on like what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of his life? And does he truly feel like satisfied, like really getting like kind of deeply connected to his satisfaction with his experience. Um, and that's what I kind of woke up with this morning. It was kind of, on the forefront of my consciousness, and I was like, oh, that was an interesting dream. How often I've had that same conversation with other people in my life. Most of them, uh, most of the time, it has to do with elderly individuals, because they're really facing the reality of, they're going to leave their body at some point soon. And they're really kind of looking back. Also, life seems to slow down more when individuals get into their elderly age. Not all, but it seems like most, where they have less responsibility, commitments in their lives, things to be focused on and engaged in, mentally, emotionally, physically. So there's more space for that, like reflection and introspection. Um, and then other individuals, usually something big has happened, big injury or, death in the family, or, so it's also like prime time to have those conversations as well. And I find myself like really like feeling like in those moments, in those conversations, that this is like real. This is like a real conversation we're having, and this is really important conversation that we're having. Um, and I feel like I wish I could be in those conversations every day, all day. I find that I wish I could like, yeah, but no one's really ready or, you know, willing to have those conversations all the time because they can be very difficult conversation to have. I don't know why I have a lot of feelings coming up for me in this moment. I don't know, some pains coming up for me. I think I'm connecting to pain uh with my own experience, really, wanting to answer these bigger questions or wanting answers and not getting them or not really having like even uh individuals or resources to even like bring those questions to. Yeah, I'm really connecting to how painful that experience can be, to not know where to go to turn to for like real knowledge that can really satisfy the spirit, satisfy the mind, satisfy the soul. And um I guess that's kind of what's coming up for me right now. I'm feeling pain about that. Feeling pain. Um, yeah, I guess I'm feeling pain because that's kind of been a big experience in my life. Just not having somewhere to go for that type of inquiry or support. Um, yeah, so I'm having a little trouble like moving on, but um, so when I woke this morning, when I woke up, like I saw like light in my window, right? And I was like, oh my God, it's gotta be like 7 o'clock already, 7:30. And like I had all these feelings, like I felt angry. I was like, no, I should have been woken up earlier. I'm leading class today, kind of feelings like that. And just and also like frustration. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even set an alarm for myself. I'm like, I could have set an alarm, looking at my responsibility in it. So and then feeling frustrated with that, and then feeling panicky, like, what do I know? How can I, give this give class on this subject, going into, self-judgment. And then I looked at my phone and it was only 5 o'clock. And that was like, it was kind of like, okay, yeah. Well, it really kind of brought to the forefront my consciousness of how, imperfect my senses are. And looking at, me believing one thing and without proper knowledge that it's actually 5 o'clock and not 7 o'clock, that it can cause a lot of disturbances mentally, emotionally, physically. I was like feeling anxious and frustrated, all because I didn't have you know the proper knowledge of what time it was. um so yeah, I guess that's kind of what came up with me around that, like looking at like how many disturbances that we are experiencing in our lives, not only because of our imperfect senses, but also not having the proper knowledge. Um, really looking at my younger years and trying to make sense of like what is this life? What are these experiences that I'm having? I had a lot of disturbing experiences, some supernatural stuff, not really knowing that, later on in life, finding out that, you know, uh, and going into like feeling like angry, like I'm being punished, like I'm cursed, I'm being punished. And then, acquiring knowledge later on in life that, God sanctions everything that happens in our lives. And there's a reason why that we experience what we experience. And there's a gift in it also from God. And not really like I can remember how much of my life not really even having that perspective, and feeling like, you know just feeling like I'm being punished. um but once I was given a different perspective, not that it was easy to accept that perspective, but at least like being given a different perspective, like opened me up to the possibility, okay, well, maybe there is a gift in this experience, that I'm not seeing, that I need to like uncover. It's a process for me to uncover that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I was at this morning, as far as the immediate kind of things happening for me around this verse. And I also was looking at the three gunas last night. I was originally going to give a class on that, really looking at the material modes, tamas, rajas, and sattva. Um, and really looking at my own experience with that as well. Like, okay, here's some knowledge that I was given, um, I guess about maybe about 10 years ago, starting around Savatov seminars, going to it's I think everybody here has been through Savatov. But going to Savatov seminars, really taking a deeper look, like this idea of like going from unconscious living to conscious living and what that really means, and being presented these principles of this material world, these three different modes that everything is operating in, and from one spectrum or the other. Um, and really looking at my own relationship with those material modes. My younger years, I would definitely say that was very deeply uh, um, in Thomas. I slept a lot when I was young, to avoid facing and feeling. That was like a coping mechanism that I had. And then I got into heavy drug use, and just really unhealthy relationships. And then coming to a place of feeling like, well, um, I just at some point in my life, I was kind of feeling like, well, let me give life a chance, and really kind of going into what I would describe as more of like Rajas energy. I guess they were starting to go into mode of goodness, healthier lifestyle, separating from unhealthy relationships, separating from the drug use, and really looking at wanting to go into family life, to find some answers. Maybe there could be some answers of like, what's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of my existence, through that experience? So that was my motivation of kind of coming into family life. Um, and I could see how I kind of got into the doing, the doing mode, do mode, and going to work and doing household stuff, taking care of the kids, into the doing. And then facing some challenges and looking for support through early family life, having children. And that's where we landed at Savatov seminars. And that helped me kind of take a deeper look at like my relationship with myself in my own life with these particular material modes, and seeing that how supportive it is to have that awareness of like, okay, how am I operating? What, and looking at like practically like what lifestyle am I living, and then what am I doing to or not doing to cultivate um the mode of goodness, which seemed attractive to me at the time, to mostly avoid more pain and challenges. So really looking at going into, like, how can I avoid, disturbances with my relationships, or with myself and my relationships outside myself. So really looking at this idea of the mode of goodness, and yeah, just being more conscious and aware of like, well, what do I want to create for my life? And then it doesn't stop there, from what I found out, um, going from the Savatov seminars into starting to expose myself to this Bhakti yoga philosophy, and this transcendental knowledge. I'm really looking at how the mode of goodness is the perfect platform for to go into Krishna consciousness or God consciousness. It's the perfect platform for us if we choose, if we want, if our goal is to have a relationship with God, and this particular practice is a personal relationship with God. If I want to have the most like ideal position to be in to cultivate that personal relationship with God, then I really want to endeavor to come from the mode of goodness, the sattva platform. So really looking at like my own life and how um, there's been this, process of attaining knowledge and creating a lot less disturbances in this life, in this material world. It's not like 100% like guaranteed that you are actually, it's more likely that disturbances will still come and go, and that the ideal place that we could, or a state that we could cultivate, is to not be disturbed, or just understand that this material world is going to be disturbing. There's going to be disturbances, but not to let that like disturb us, not to let it take our focus away from our relationship with God, our personal relationship with God, and our service to God. um so that's kind of where I was kind of going with the three gunas, and I feel like it kind of relates to this as well. I listened to a talk on YouTube from this particular devotee, and I really like the analogy that he was kind of presenting. He was speaking to this story. Was It's like a, I don't know if it's a parable or story, but so that this peddler has these hats, right? And it's like Caps for Sale, the book that we have when we were young. I don't know if anybody else here knows that, Caps for Sale, but this particular parable is similar to that story. I never heard this version before. I thought it was really fun. So this peddler had these hats, and he took a nap next to a tree, and he when he woke up, all his hats were gone. So he's like looking around, and like he couldn't see them, and then he looks up in the tree, and all these monkeys had his hats on. And so this devotee was presenting this parable, and in the mode of tamas, you know it would look like the peddler would get angry and like maybe start like getting frustrated and angry, and then storm off and leave. That would be like the consciousness of tamas, um and just give up. And then he presented the consciousness of rajas would be like the man's feeling frustrated, and he gets a stick and he starts banging the trunk of the tree and banging the branches, and then all the monkeys like run off to other trees, and that doesn't really solve his solution either. So in the mode of goodness, he was presenting the peddler would have knowledge, and he would know that like monkeys like to mimic. So he takes his hat off, and he had a basket. He throws his hat into a basket, and all the monkeys see him throw all their hat. They see him throw his hat in the basket, so they take the hats off their head and throw it into the basket. So it's like really looking at like the consciousness of the peddler and the outcome of the experience. So really looking at the this idea of like and then I was even thinking like, okay, like during the Savatov seminar, there's a particular process where we look at like different perspectives, like lose lose, win lose and win win um, perspective, and even looking at like, well, how does that relate to the consciousness of the different modes? Looking at Thomas is lose lose, Rajas would be win lose, and then win-win would be the sattvic platform. So really kind of looking at that, like I was kind of thinking about that as well, and just kind of appreciating, um, just really like what it means to be conscious and aware, and what it means to be, unconscious in our lives, and how, how important knowledge is for us to cultivate, or to reach a goal that maybe we didn't even know that it even existed. So looking at like, okay, in my life, I was raised Christian, and really looking at like how, Christians, a lot of them, they want to go to heaven, right? So that's their like main goal. And a lot of bhakti yoga individuals, they want to go to the spiritual world. So it's kind of the same thing. They have a goal in mind. Um, uh, Neither one of those really appeal to me personally. I guess I'm looking for more like what do I want right now? What is the goal that I want right now? And what I want is I want to have an alive experience with my creator. I want it to be real and alive, and like that is seems like a really like attractive goal to me. I want to have that. How do I cultivate that relationship? How do I attain that goal that I want for myself? So, without proper knowledge, it can be very difficult to uh, to get to that goal. And from what I've experienced, um, with not only with Christianity and the different, devotees of Christ, the devotees of God in the Old Testament, really looking at how how committed they were to give their lives, to give everything that they had, their time, their energy, and then showing up for that relationship as well, like showing up, like, through this particular practice, bhakti yoga. What does that look like? It looks like chanting, it looks like reading, it looks like hearing, it looks like association, and we can really look at like how committed are we, like what is our commitment to that relationship? If we really want intimacy with God, like how committed are we? So that's a big part of the process. But without the knowledge of even like how to even cultivate that relationship, um, it can the effectiveness and of our endeavors um, can be um, not as effective without proper knowledge of what we want, our goal, and then how to attain that goal. Um, I was speaking with my niece not too long ago. Um, I went down. She's a performer. She's does musicals, and does performing, and I was and so I picked her up and we drove down to South Florida for a funeral. And it was really fun. I arranged that we could ride together because I really wanted to connect intimately with her, you know, as long as possible. And I was playing with really challenging her to take a deeper look at her relationship with different um, just different aspects of life. One part we brought in the conversation of sex life, and really looking at like, you know, how, I mean, even for me, I've used it for, pain management. and it can be really common for people to use it, stress, pain management, and to really look at like, well, what if there was information from God of what the purpose of sex life is? Like, what if, like, just be in that question, like, I mean, we can use a computer as a doorstop. Dear Govinda usually uses this analogy. We can use a computer as a doorstop, and it's very effective, right? It's like holds the door very well, like no problem. But without like proper understanding of what that computer could potentially be used for, um, then we're just wasting the use of it. And then looking at also like in relationship to that, I guess I was bringing up sex life with my niece, really looking at how like what if our creator gave us information on like what is the purpose of sex life, and that we don't necessarily need to figure it out. But I mean, if you just look at like mechanically, you have a peg and a hole, right? And then so that makes sense. Okay, the peg goes in the hole, and then you're looking at like, oh, what's the outcome of that? Well, there's seed and there's an egg, and then it's creates another human being or another animal, I guess. Depends on animals. Um but as far as speaking to human beings, so it seems like just on a logical level, like, okay, like, peg goes in a hole, and then you get another human being. Okay, well, that just kind of makes sense. Like, that's the purpose of sexual activity on just the physical, like, logical level. But then receiving the additional knowledge of like, you know, it's not necessarily designed. It can be used for pain management. It can be used for enjoyment. It can be used for, so many different things that somebody wants to use it for. Um, but really looking at like, um, uh, what is the designer's intention for that uh, activity, and then really looking at like, without like additional knowledge, that these bodies are not our bodies to these bodies, nothing in this material world we own. So for me personally, going through my experience, and this is what I was kind of speaking to my niece about, not only getting, the knowledge from the designer of this, vehicle, but also like really looking at this idea that there's no ownership. Like, I don't own my body, like being presented with this knowledge. So there's like a whole nother level of like knowledge and understanding that wasn't there before, where I was like, well, this is my body. I can enjoy it, and as I want to. And really looking at like, well, uh like, without the complete understanding of like that this body is not my body, when I came into that perspective and was giving myself to that perspective, then um uh my relationship, even with like sex life, changed, where it was like, okay, well, this isn't like, you know it didn't I didn't feel as like free to enjoy as I did before. So really looking at like, how knowledge can can help us really, like, having that bigger perspective and that bigger the proper understanding of like, what is the purpose of activities in life, and what is or like, how I guess I'm trying to figure out what I'm saying here. Um, Really looking at how life for me seems to uh my engagement and my relationship and activities with life have changed as I gain more knowledge and give myself to those perspectives. Um, if a particular goal is if the particular purpose, like the knowledge of like the purpose of life is not to just enjoy. The purpose of life is to realize who we are and what our relationship to our creator is, and then realign ourselves back into that like service. So that's the whole purpose of life. And without that knowledge, then I could be lost in enjoying, you know, with this belief, my body, and be lost in and entangled in that whole experience. I have a friend of mine that I recently he reached out to me like a week ago, and it was really, he really spoke to this. He was like when he was 19, he went into the Marines and he went into special forces, and he was there for I don't know at least 12 years, and then got into working for the Secret Service and all sorts of like just kind of impossible mission kind of stuff, like all sorts of weird, like wherever somebody could go who is like into like adventure and challenge and just like all these like physically going through all sorts of intense like challenge and mental challenge, just really pushing themselves to the like climbing to the top of the Mount Everest kind of consciousness, really like that's how he's been living his life. And it was like he was like you know what, he's like I'm starting to see that it's a never ending process for me. He's like what's the next challenge, what's the next like thing I can like go and get training and become like it's just like. And I mean, on a simple level, he was speaking to like, just really like, being material exhausted, looking at like, well, I bought a new car and I'm not satisfied with that. I got a new house. I'm not satisfied. Well, maybe I need a new house. Maybe I need a new car. Like that's on like just kind of a basic, level of understanding of, I mean, he's more like into the adventure of the experience. And but it's in the same light, it's like we're 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 really like it'll be a never ending process of unsatisfaction. And so I was after he got done sharing what he was sharing, I really like heard him and he felt understood. And I presented to him the perspective of the Vedic culture, where like we're brought up and given spiritual knowledge, like we're educated on spiritual knowledge from the beginning, so that we have that before we go into family life, so that family life's the whole experience of family life, both parties know like what the purpose is, right? So that it's not like, well, I'm material exhausted and you're not satisfying me anymore, so I'm going to go find somebody else to satisfy me. It's like that what we see in the world that we're living in today, where there's divorce is so high. It's like what is the purpose of marriage? Like what is the whole point? Or without that knowledge and understanding, like it falls apart, or it's just not satisfying anymore. So we want to satisfy ourselves, and we're seeking material. We're seeking the material to satisfy us, the temporary. And so I was presenting this perspective to him, and then family life, and then I presented the idea to him that it's like when we get into our older age, that it's time to really turn our focus and turn away from material life or family life, material focus, and really spend the rest of our life cultivating that intimacy, that deep intimacy with God and our Creator. And he was just like taken back by it, and he was just like, thank you. He's like, that makes complete sense. And and then I spoke to, like, we're pursuing we're pursuing satisfaction for our eternal desire. We have an eternal being inside of us. It has desire, and the only thing that's going to fulfill that desire is the eternal energy, the eternal spirit, and our relationship with God. And so, yeah, just really looking at, like, how long if we wouldn't have had that conversation, and he's like really excited to continue to have those conversations with me, and we will. But I'm just really looking at, like, how he's not an unusual case. How many individuals that are in these bodies and living these lives, and without, like, really proper knowledge, a proper understanding of, like, who we are, on who we are, we truly are, and what is our relationship with this life that we're living, and then what is our eternal relationship? How much time and energy and that is just used for, like, not real, like, satisfaction. Um, so yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to go back and read this whole verse again, because there was so much here. And I mean, and I intend to do it on my personal time. I'm not gonna read it again, because I'm like, but I guess I mainly picked this particular verse, because of the title. It's the most confidential knowledge, and, like, you're really looking at how in my life, like, without the real knowledge, like, how lost we can be, and how much time and energy we could spend on what's not real knowledge, which is the majority of the knowledge that individuals have in contact with in this material world. um Hare Krishna. I'm gonna try to attempt to read the verse again. I'm gonna read the English. I'm not gonna do the Sanskrit. The Supreme Lord said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most secret wisdom, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Hare Krishna. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? Yeah.
No, thank you for the call. Appreciate it. Yeah, like, I like how we were, like, saying, I love to talk, but Hare Krishna, everyone. But what comes to me is like this is like this practice that Shri Prabhupada gave us is a yukta vairagya. So of course there is like time in life when it's the time to like really like solely focus on discussing Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting Hare Krishna. And that's not really recommended for us. Like Maharaj Parikshit did it only last 7 days of his life. And if he didn't know when his death was approaching, maybe he wouldn't do it even for those 7 days. Same for like Maharaj Yudhishthir, for example. He was like ruling his kingdom to the very end of like deciding like it's time to go. Or I just had one more example. It kind of escaped. But there is just like many examples of this. Yeah, Bhishmadev, Father Bhishmadev, also pure devotee. So he was like fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra against Krishna. It was like their pastime to fight together. He really wanted to get Krishna to break his promise that he would not fight, and he got him fight. And he like got to see Krishna like really angry face, and Bhishmadev was like so churning that he seen Krishna angry, like killing angry.
Yeah.
Anyway, he is like lying on the bed of arrows, and he's preaching to Maharaj Yudhishthira how to lead the kingdom.
Mm.
And then he decides it's time to leave the body, and so he like forgets about his like family responsibilities, and he focuses only on Krishna. And I'm saying it because like I think we sometimes tend to have like this misconception that like it should be like the last 30 years of life only focusing on Bhagavatam, or like now wow, like I'm so miserable because I have to do so many other things than like practice Krishna consciousness. But that's not really how is it meant. And yeah, like what's his name, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, 13 children.
Mm.
The I don't know what's the name of the magister of Jagannath Puri. It's just judge, high court judge. He has like so many occupations, and his consciousness is like, Krishna, this wife is your wife.
Mm.
These boys are your children, and I'm just a servant in your home. I take care for them. So it's Krishna consciousness.
Mm.
And we like really, except like very few exceptions, Srila Prabhupada would always recommend to like live the life in Krishna consciousness rather than like doing something else, or plan like, oh, now I can do it, but maybe when I am older I could.
Yeah.
And I'm really, and that's what I like, the point you made, like this is your desire, right? It was so beautiful when you shared that, like your desire is to have like experience the relationship with Krishna now.
Mm.
And that's what this process is meant to be. And you said like I'm in the question, like how can I do that? And then I have a curiosity about, you shared 1, 2, 3. You shared about like how you feel like you are not having like anyone you could come to with your questions and inquiries.
Mm.
So I'm really like curious about that, like how come?
How come? I guess I was speaking to first, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I was the first thing that you're speaking to. Yeah, the hour is now to inquire about the absolute and cultivate your Krishna consciousness and not wait till a certain time in your life. Yeah.
Or when the external circumstances change, or when
Yeah.
you have to go to work, or when I don't have to raise children. It's just like consciousness feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, and to speak to your other question, your curiosity, I was speaking to like my younger years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like probably all the way up probably all the way up to like, mid-20s, somewhere around there.
Yeah. That
Around
was
there.
the pain coming up from like remembering those times when you were so lost.
Yeah, not having a safe place to go to share my heart confidentially and my experience confidentially without being labeled or judged or locked up or whatever, just medicated.
Men don't do that.
Yeah, men don't do that. And the culture that I grew up in, I didn't really feel that safety. I I actually I went through rehabs and, therapists, and this one particular therapist I went to, it was the best therapist ever. He sat and listened to me for a whole hour. And my mom was angry.
He didn't.
Yeah, she never she wouldn't let me go back to him. And I was like, he did the awesomest job. He listened to me. He gave me empathy for like an hour. I was so frustrated. I was just like, this is the world that I live in. It's just crazy. This is a crazy, you know. Anyway, so yeah, that's I was speaking to like
Okay, I get it.
pain from my childhood. Yeah, just kind of, really looking at how important the work that Sabatov does for the communities and the world relationships, and then moving further into that, like the work that Krishna consciousness and Bhakti yoga, like how much of a service it is to share this philosophy as well, to raise the consciousness and awareness of yeah of each other and this life, and um how it can be saving grace for someone you know that doesn't have any knowledge or is stuck in a perspective, or it doesn't have a place, someone to share with, that's not gonna that's just gonna accept them unconditionally. um Hare Krishna.
So well, I know there might be other comments, but I'm like really curious to hear about how would you respond to your question? How can I, experience that relationship with Krishna today?
Yeah. Oh, you're curious about my question of being in that question. How do I cultivate that?
How do you respond to that?
Well, I know I have some knowledge around that. It's like, there's chanting, there's hearing, there's praying, there's reading, there's association, there's, you know, so it's, I don't know. Some of the like, how Srila Prabhupada or even some of the other individuals, the lines in the Acharya line, reading about their personal life and how they were actively communicating with their deities, and and
That's what you want.
yeah, I want, yeah, I want that. I want to cultivate more of that, more of like, there's even like preachers that I admire, that where did they how did they become so potent? Well, their answer is they read scripture every 15 minutes and they pray every 15 minutes. But it's like, okay, that's the commitment. So if we want a certain result, then that that's a certain level of commitment. Just like Srila Prabhupada, how was that?
No scrolling Facebook on every 15 minutes.
I don't know if that would work, but maybe if you're looking at the right things.
Those God conscious accounts.
Yeah, God conscious accounts, just
Sure.
just aspiring to have an experience like Srila Prabhupada, for it, how every moment he's like, communicating with Krishna, like, all the directions that he gave the individuals, and he was receiving that, guidance and that intelligence from Krishna, and he was just a vessel for Krishna's you know desire. So yeah, really looking at like, yeah, each day, like, what is my level of commitment? How committed am I to have that relationship? The times in my life when I felt the most connected and receiving direct, you know, visions or dreams, have been the times in my life when I've been like immersed, like fully immersing myself. So, really like looking at that, like, so I guess that's my answer to that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Keep on sharing.
Yeah.
Constant devotion.
Yeah. Just, you know, Hare Krishna, would anybody else like to share?
I feel like,
Mm.
thank you for the class. Um, Well, one thing I was thinking during the class, because you spoke a lot about having a proper knowledge. And I wondered what you think the proper knowledge is. If you have it, if you already have it.
Oh.
And then I have one other comment, the purport of what I was hearing. But you can respond to that first, I guess.
Okay. So my understanding or my experience with proper knowledge is connecting to like bona fide you know religions or spiritual practices that and really I guess it's eh, as much as like I feel like it's up to the individual to really decide for themselves like you know what that proper knowledge is. I mean, it's a perspective, right? Like you come into contact with Krishna consciousness. Okay, Krishna is blue. Okay, well, all right, Krishna is blue. And he plays a flute and he runs around with boys and with cows. Okay. I'm like,
That's perfect.
yeah, and then I'm like, it's like I'm giving this, I'm receiving this knowledge, and it's a perspective, and it's like, I, how much, what's that?
Is it absolute truth or is it just
Well, according to different bona fide paths, they say that they're absolute. This is the absolute truth, or this is a bona fide. So I have to decide for myself. I mean, it's all a personal like journey, right? It's a personal experience of like, giving myself, okay, the three gunas, like for instance, it's like do I believe that exists or not? Well, I can kind of look at the world around me and be like, well, I guess, yeah, things are operating in the mode of ignorance and the mode of, passion and the mode of goodness. I can look at that, like, look at my experience and be like, okay, well, and the more I go through that process, if I'm receiving perspectives, if I'm receiving knowledge, and I'm giving myself to that process and having an experience, then I trust more of like, okay, this philosophy says this is the absolute truth. Okay, well, let me like, I can't just like blindly follow that, like, or believe that. Like, let me give myself to the experience and see what the results are. And if like, certain aspects of the experience I seem to resonate with and make sense with, and I can look at my own life in relationship to them, then I trust more. Do I trust, that the creator of everything is Krishna and a blue boy and plays a flute and runs around with cow? I'm still like, it's like, okay. I'm like, I'm open to that perspective, and still there's trust that's not completely there. Do I trust that God's not going to handle me roughly anymore? No, there's still some trust issues there that I have. Like, so it's like, am I surrendering fully to in my life? No, there's still some trust there that I don't, I'm still like have trust issues. So, it's like I feel like for me personally, it's like a journey. I'm receiving perspectives or proper knowledge that is claiming to be absolute or proper knowledge. It's like, but until I like go through my own personal experience with that knowledge, then so I guess that's my answer to it. Was that clear or was I kind of
I think what I'm hearing is, but I think it's valuable because you're saying that there's multiple ways of knowing, which is described in our scriptures here in Srila Prabhupada, that there's more than one type of knowledge. There's the authoritative knowledge, like the knowledge descending from God through the representatives. And he did have more than one representative, and you're acknowledging that. And then there's the individual having experience. Experiential knowledge is also important. You can't like it's a part of that process of connecting the soul to the supreme, to God.
Mm.
There's knowledge that descends and it goes to the representative, the bona fide representative, and then the soul needs to experiment with the knowledge and gain trust and gain more and more surrender and trust. So I think it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I hear you that there's not complete trust. And so it's you're not coming to this class to say, here's the absolute truth, because not that wouldn't be authentic for you.
Right.
But you do have some knowledge and you have experimented with God consciousness and trusting authority and connecting to God. So it's an important topic to you. At the same time, you have your personal process.
Yeah. I mean, my life has benefited in so many ways with making commitments and giving myself to new perspectives and proper knowledge, giving myself to, absolute knowledge, in theory, like,
You
yeah.
you taking on you're receiving very powerful knowledge from Srila Prabhupada. And I know you've received knowledge from Lord Jesus Christ, and you don't speak whimsically about it. You're authentic and in your process, taking it each bit by bit, and you're on the journey.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I like how, you kind of clarified the, descending knowledge and through bona fide representatives, and then, the spirit soul needing to go through their own journey and experience with that to really, come to a place. I feel like that would be like an ultimate goal in my life, is to come to a place of like having like just solid conviction in what I'm experiencing, and or maybe I'm already there, but it's just kind of all over the place in my experience, where I feel there's certain areas I feel more solid in my conviction, and then other areas I'm still kind of like I'm not there yet.
I think like
Hmm.
it's like very honest. Like the first stage of bhakti process. I don't want to say this hand, so I will just say it quickly. Well, the first stage is faith, right? And when we don't have full faith, it doesn't mean that we cannot start like the fourth process, which is anartha nivritti, pulling the weeds of the heart. But Lira Govinda often says, like, we all have some faith, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here on Sunday morning. But it's also true for everyone that we don't have like a full faith, because if we did, our life would look quite different. And like one like test of faith for me is a trigger. Like what is my experience is that when people, including myself, have like a decreased faith in their spiritual practice, then if like, I don't know, a Christian comes and starts to tell you like, hey, this is bogus and you are going to go to hell, it's like really emotionally triggering. Like we want to fight back, argue and things like this. And it's usually a reflection of our inner insecurities that are being triggered by the statements. But yeah, it's a first stage. And to achieve that like stage, not like state, is really like a huge thing. So Srila Prabhupada says, this is also gambling for the conditioned spirit soul to like put so much energy into this process when we like cannot really know. It's a gambling.
Yeah.
And and to get to that stage of a full faith, it's not like a cheap, automatic or fast. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate what you're saying. And looking at faith is the starting place, and we all have to have faith in something, or whether we're conscious of it or
It's enough to gamble.
yeah,
to try this,
yeah, because we're coming into contact with it. It's claiming to be the absolute truth, and now like, okay, well, that sounds like a better place to put my money, and at least it's claiming to be the absolute truth.
It's a better bet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Hare Krishna, Bhakta
Hey,
Devani.
hey guys, Hare Krishna. Yeah, nice to be with you for some of the class this morning. I'm sitting here with Conch, and I'm enjoying the whole discussion. Thank you for what you just shared, Ladini, and that was really enlivening, uplifting for me. So I hope what I have to share is also uplifting and enlivening for all
Hare
of us.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So yeah, something you said earlier about like, do you try? I liked your stream of thought there, like where like you were giving Garuda, you were checking in about like where's your faith, and um yeah, like okay, so do you said do you trust? Conch kind of picked up on this, and we were having a little side discussion here. Like, do you trust that Krishna won't handle you roughly?
Mm,
And it's like, oh okay, like isn't it the Chaitanya Shikshashtakam? It's like even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, something like you guys are gonna have to help me out there.
Yes.
And that brought me to think about Prahlad Maharaj, and he's man, I mean that's like the ultimate, right? He's put through
mm,
the snake pit and gonna be dunked in oil, and each time Krishna protects him, but like he's under constant threat of death. I mean, can you imagine the anxiety, but like for us to be in that
mm.
position, the anxiety. Of
Yeah,
course, Prahlad, not an anxiety, right? Because he has that faith and trust. I mean, I'm
yeah.
saying, of course, I don't know. I'm needing help here, right? So I'm thinking of
Yes.
that example of
Mm,
like, yes,
Very
Prahlad
helpful.
yeah.
is under constant threat and attack to the extreme by his family. His father wants to kill him, and he's in Krishna consciousness. He's teaching Krishna consciousness. He's in trouble because he's preaching Krishna consciousness. And I'm not sure how this relates exactly, but it's what came to my mind around. So, do I trust that God won't ever handle me roughly? It's like,
You know,
okay.
always handle me roughly.
Yeah, and because of that, the faith has increased. So it's an option, at least. It is a
Yeah.
possibility that by being handled roughly, our faith can increase. And that by the motivation of Kali Yuga, our faith can exponentially increase if we grab onto the rope. Is that basically right? So I just wanted to keep going here. Maybe we don't have a lot of time, but thank you for at least putting that out there, Garuda, because it's stimulated a good bit of questioning for me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, really looking at, how being handled roughly is actually something that could be desired by potentially, like Queen Kuti, wanted calamities and challenges, so she always remembered Krishna. I mean, I guess the reason why that came up for me is because, you know, a good portion of my younger years was what I experienced of being handled roughly um, by God, because God sanctions everything that happens, right? And really not really looking at like my responsibility as far as karma goes or anything like that. Without knowledge or understanding, I'm stuck in my victim consciousness. I'm an innocent child. I'm an innocent child. That's where I was at. God doesn't care about me. He doesn't love me. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I existed before this body. What? I'm like, I didn't even think about that before. And karma, what's that about? Like looking at like, oh, okay, so now there's a whole new perspectives, new knowledge into my sphere of understanding, and to where, it helped, you know, when those perspectives were presented to me, I was I couldn't do anything but naturally kind of soften a little bit of my anger toward God. It's like, well, maybe I am responsible for what happened when I was a child. Maybe I had something to do with it. I guess I'm open to that, and I guess my anger doesn't feel so, fixed on, being this innocent being that's being
Yeah,
punished.
yeah,
So I guess that's where my statement came from. But yeah, looking at like Parad and how like just solid in his conviction and his faith and his relationship, how like connected in his relationship, that I don't even know if he was experiencing any anxiety, but yeah, like you were saying, like anybody in that position would just be like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? It's like,
Anybody,
and my,
especially youth, because I think I really what I'm grabbing onto in your point here is that as we get knowledge, okay, as we mature and we ask questions and we realize, like you're saying, oh, I existed in another, before this body, so what does that mean in karma? So as
Mm,
youth, like with my stepsons, the teenagers, I'm seeing them suffering so much, right? They're
mm,
suffering so much, and I suffered so much, and you suffered so much, and it was okay. One thing, it was before we had knowledge, especially in Krishna consciousness. You had some Christian upbringing, but the modes of ignorance and like the things we did as youth, as teenagers, and in our 20s and like that, is like drinking and drugs or whatever, falling just like really hard lessons. Like that's when we can. It's the ideal time. This is my realization, is that's the ideal time to suffer our heaviest karmas, in a sense, because we're kind of young and like we can tolerate it possibly, or something. I don't say realization, but this is my thought, is like for my stepkids that are suffering now, it's like what I want them to realize, what I want them to get is that, great, like, yeah, like you're going through really, painful drama and heartbreak and all this stuff. It's like, good, get it over with. Like, great, like embrace it. And your job right now is just to tolerate all this suffering. It's your karma. And your other job, there, two parts that I'm seeing, is like tolerate it and don't create more. you know
yeah,
Tolerate it without generating more karma for yourself, and like get it over with. Because as we get so as and then as we get knowledge, then naturally, okay, we're thinking like, oh, I don't want to generate more, and like I can get into this place of transcending my karma now through Krishna consciousness. But also like getting older, less resilient maybe, or something, in some ways. It's like, oh, I don't want to be suffering too much of that karma later, something like that.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you're looking at your stepsons, how they're going through facing some pretty intense challenges, and how you want to support them to just help bring the awareness there that you know um do this now. You have your youth, but really look at, like, there's a lot that we can uh have control over, a lot we can avoid in the future if we're more conscious of how we live our lives now. If we are more conscious and aware, and it's an opportunity to raise that consciousness, because there's suffering there. It's more, it's more, it's a more, there could be more urgency because there's suffering there. I guess how I was speaking earlier with, elderly, looking at, their life, and, asking bigger questions. There's more urgency to ask bigger questions because they're facing death. So I guess in the same time, they're in the same way, they're kind of like facing facing challenges, really intense challenges, based off of their own karma that they brought on themselves, you know, and really kind of bringing that awareness there. It's the perfect opportunity to bring that awareness there, so that they can, have a different perspective, and potentially avoid a lot more suffering. Um, yeah, yeah. I wish I had, someone in my life was, just presenting this perspective when I was suffering so much when I was young. So I mean, I kind of figured it out eventually, but for me, it took almost like 12 years or something of just really realizing that, like, hey, I experienced intense, you know, challenges, but I'm also bringing it on myself. I'm like, I can avoid a lot of this. Like, so,
But
yeah.
so also, yeah, like Bhakta Devan's stepsons like grew up with this philosophy.
Oh, okay,
I
yeah.
believe so.
Yeah.
So they know that. They know that. And like me, when I'm suffering and someone like would come and tell me it's your karma and opportunity to bury bad karma and all these things, I would probably be very pissed off, especially if it was my stepfather, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just, just putting it out there that, they have the philosophical background, and to hear it from someone might be more like a trigger than, a solace.
Yeah.
I'm not saying always, but in this circumstance. And also there is this principle, like if something is happening to me, it's very appropriate to like cultivate that consciousness. Yeah, it's my karma, and I probably deserve much worse, and cultivate the tolerate. It can also be a trap of like avoiding going through that experience,
Yeah.
and avoiding for like experiencing the pain, and also being harsh with ourselves. So it can be a trap even with ourselves to do it, but to do it to others it can be like really far greater trap. And to others, like when we see they are suffering, it's really like for us to cultivate compassion. Wow, this person is suffering so much, and not like, not necessarily like in the sentimental way, but really like be there, like caring, supportive.
Yeah.
And yeah, like this, like, I can go to slaughterhouse and tell the cows, oh, you guys, this is your karma, probably, in your past life you were eating meat.
Yeah.
That's not what we are supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's like we are supposed to have compassion, and if possible, save the cow from that karma. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate, what you're saying. Yeah, looking at like how it can be like that, how it can not be received, or it can do the opposite. It can repel, like, get away from me, or using it also as an excuse to not take responsibility. But really highlighting like giving empathy, really giving
And
empathy.
to ourselves too.
Yeah.
And also giving ourselves the freedom to desire for happiness. Because it's also, okay, Queen Kunti prays for the calamities, but it's quite exceptional. And if you do that, it will be very artificial. And we actually might attract more calamities, through that consciousness. Yeah. Krishna does reciprocate with his devotees, or with every living entity, really.
Yeah.
So it's also like,
We get what we want. What are
we do get what we want, so like really. And myself, and I know many other devotees who had that experience of like praying, like Krishna, okay, throw it all on me, I want a quick purification and go back, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the experiences with that are really miserable. And always, I never heard a different story, always ends like, okay, Krishna, this is good enough. I don't have to be that fast up,
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it can be like it's like up to Krishna, we want to be happy, and we want to have relationship with him and go back, and we want to enjoy. And that's true. And then if Krishna sees, there is like some anartha that needs to be taken care of by some rough handling, he will do that, like don't worry. It's just like not for me to be like, oh, I think I like really need to be handled roughly here,
Yeah.
So I'm actually, Krishna, if you want to like transform my heart, let's make a deal that you do it gently.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the conscious part of Krishna conscious, right? To be conscious and aware of our interactions and our relationship and what we want, and what our goals.
Sincerity in that, like, if you handle me roughly, Krishna, I will probably be just really angry with you.
Yeah.
I will become depressed. Just like, if you want to transform my heart with love and affection, and I'm like completely just melt, like. Anyhow.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you for sharing.
Shared something from the purport that I liked.
Yeah. Okay.
Was if you want to. It's 49:30. I like how Srila Prabhupada focused a good amount in the purport on discussions of Krishna and association with the devotees, with everybody.
Mhm.
And it's like basically like churning over the knowledge, like giving ourselves association with others and getting into discussion and like how this is anyway. I'm going to read something. So he says, the Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of the devotees. It like covers the whole thing. That was like one sentence, but it says like the Lord understands the living entity, the mentality and sincerity who's trying to engage in Krishna consciousness, gives him intelligence to understand the science in the association of devotees. And then he says, next, discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement toward spiritual realization. So, anyway, I just like how knowledge, this verse is about Krishna imparting the most secret wisdom and relieving people of misery of material existence, and how in the purport Prabhupada several times mentions association. That the knowledge isn't just you alone in a book, it's like discussions of Krishna and how potent it is. I don't know, it's just cool to how Prabhupada put association in there a few times.
I just want to say that I believe that you and the book is association, but you and you is not association.
Yes, yeah, you yourself with the book, association with the pure devoted, that is association. Yeah, but I understood too that it's like discussion mentioned. Also, there's one more sentence that I really liked. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. I feel like this is like Prahlad Maharaj. He was situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna. So he was naturally transcendental.
Oh, Prabhupada.
And Srila Prabhupada. Yeah.
Yeah, naturally transcendental. I like that connection. Naturally transcendental. That's natural for us, but we are in the naturally not transcendental.
Yeah. Wait.
Hare Krishna. Yes, thank you. Association. That's what I was hearing.
Yeah, discussion.
The importance of association. Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for
Srila
the
Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. No, Krishna, Krishna, I think there was a comment in the chat. Is it still recording too?
It's still recording.
Oh, Rukmini.
Krishna.
Oh, clapping.
Hey, she's
Hare
clapping.
Krishna.
Hare Bol. See what
Nice
this
to have
does.
you with us, Mother.
Rampara said, I appreciate your empowered preaching, Garuda.
Oh.
Hare Krishna. And then
Hare
Bhakti
Krishna.
Kim said, thank you for a very thoughtful class and meaningful conversation.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for coming with us here. This journey with my husband. Hare Bol. Have a beautiful Krishna conscious day.